And they're like, okay, get her to the OR room stat, like she has to go now. And I remember just being wheeled, and all I see is lights down the hallway, and I'm like all alone. Hey, Courtney here. This is Raising Tiny Feet, where we talk about all things faith, motherhood, and homeschool. So today I'm going to be sharing my birth story. And so my birth story has a backstory. So I'm going to be sharing a little bit of both, but I want to tell you about my backstory if you don't know. I'm Courtney, mother of 4. I have Malachi, who is 6, Noah, who is 2, Gabriel, who is 1, and Naomi, who is technically 4 months, but at the same time she's 1 month. And that's where my birth story comes in, the birth story of Naomi. And she was born at 25 weeks gestation. She was 15 whole weeks early. Usually you have your baby at 40 weeks or 36 to 40 weeks. I had her at 25. And so I'm going to share this birth story with you guys so you can kind of hear about how it all went, how it was life giving birth to a premature baby. Okay, so for starters, it started out as your regular schmegular day, your regular schmegular pregnancy. I was 18 weeks along, and we had just gotten our first stimulus check. So I'm like, okay, let me go do something for me. I never do anything for me unless it's a shopping spree at Dollar Tree. So I decided, let me do something for me. So I took myself and me, and I went to Best Buy, and I decided to buy an iPad Pro. And so with this iPad, I don't know, I had plans for it to help me with my business and to, I saw everything that it could do, and I was going to be able to edit on it. So I thought, sure, I'll go for it. So I bought this iPad Pro, or I went to Best Buy to buy this iPad Pro, and everything was going pretty smoothly. I picked out the biggest iPad, and I got the pen, the magic keyboard, all that good stuff. So I go to checkout, and my card's declined. And I'm like, that's funny. I have money, trust me. I promise I have money. Please, just so you know, I have money. So I'm over here just like, I'm not broke. Trust me, I have the money for this. But then at the same time, me and the guy, we both say, oh, I forgot, your bank will limit how much you spend daily. So this is probably over your daily spending limit. And so I didn't even know that until a couple years ago when I upgraded my camera. That I'm like, oh wow, I didn't even know I had a daily spending limit. I thought my money was my money, but obviously it's not. So I called the bank. It's 3:30, and I'm like, thank goodness, because the bank closes at 4. So I call the bank, and I'm like, hey, can you up my daily spending limit? I'm at Best Buy right now, and I'm trying to buy an iPad. And so they go ahead, they up my daily spending limit, and I try to swipe my card again, and they say, well, hold on, wait 10 minutes for it to process in the system. And so I wait the 10 minutes, and then I swipe my card or put my chip in. Everything goes through, and I'm like, sweet. So my receipt's printing. As my receipt's printing, I feel this big gush of water, and I'm like, okay, I've been playing around with the Kegels. I haven't done any Kegels. I haven't tried to help myself together. So I'm just like, did I just pee on myself? I know if I have to pee and I'm holding it for way too long, a little bit will slip out, just because I'm on my 4th kiddo, and baby's not really on the bladder, but still I'm on my 4th kiddo. So I'm and the last 2 were back to back, so they're all 1 year apart. And so I'm just I should have listened to the app. I should have done my Kegels. And so I'm trying to hold it in, and it's not holding in. And so I take off my jacket, I tie it around my waist, and I'm just he's like, okay, do you need help with anything else? And I'm like, no, I'm good. So I start waddling out, just hoping that no more, trying to squeeze and waddle at the same time. I'm not super big, but I'm just trying to be inconspicuous while waddling. And so I waddle my way out, and it's still not stopping. And I'm just hoping, I had on blue leggings, so I'm hoping you can't see the water gushing down. And so I get to the car, and I text my little sister, and I'm just I think my water just broke. And she's like, call your doctor. And so I'm a seasoned pro. This is my 4th kid. I'm not going to call my doctor over me peeing on myself. That's going to be so embarrassing. And so I'm I don't think I will. I'll probably just, couldn't hold it, which I didn't have to pee, but I thought like maybe I just couldn't hold it. And so I get in the car and it's still kind of going, and I'm kind of like, okay. Decide to call my doctor, and I'm in the parking lot at my apartment. So I call my doctor, and she's like, oh, let me ask your doctor what she wants. You know, the nurse practitioner is like, let me ask your doctor what she wants to do, just to see. And so I'm like, okay. So I wait a little bit. She calls me back, and she's like, okay. She says, go ahead and go into labor and delivery. And so, of course, like all girls do, we go inside and get ourselves together, change pants, put on a pad, and then I waddle myself downstairs. I don't even know how I didn't have the kids at that point. Like, I had a kid free, like God was working things out for my good. I didn't even see it. But I didn't have any of the kids. And so I put everything down. I'm like, you know what? I know how the hospital is. So I pack up my iPad. I'm like, they're going to think I'm so extra, but I get an extension cord. I grab my iPad boxes and stuff. I didn't grab my phone charger, but I thought that the iPad was going to have the same charger, but Apple didn't have the same charger. So I grabbed all my stuff because I know how hospitals are. I grabbed a notebook and stuff, and then I headed out the door, went to labor and delivery. I get there, they confirm, yes, your water has broke. Yes, your water has broken. There we go. I'm 18 weeks, and so I'm not thinking much of it. I'm just thinking, science, like something. I'm not the first person this has happened to, but I didn't know the extensity. Let me stop. I didn't know the magnitude of what your water did. I didn't know that it helped your kidney and bladder to learn how to function before you're outside of the womb. I didn't know that it supplied practicing breaths for the baby to be able to get ready to come out. I didn't know that that was vital for the lungs to have fluid. I was just like, my water broke. My water didn't break with my middle two. It broke with my first kiddo. It was the big gush. And I woke up out of my sleep, and it was like a big gush, and then it was some trickles. I didn't lose all the water at the same time. This time I lost all of my water. And so I get to labor and delivery. They check me out, do a sonogram. Baby's still doing okay. They tie the monitors around my belly, and they just monitor me until the OB on call can come in, because my doctor wasn't on call. And so the OB that works at my doctor's office, who is on call, came in, and he said, your waters definitely have broken. There's not anything that we can really do. You'll probably go into labor in the next day. If not the next day, then you'll go into labor within the next week. Did you want to go ahead and give birth now, or did you want to wait and see what happens? And so, because I don't know anything about, the medical world, I'm on the artsy side. I'm like, okay, so if I have the baby now, that means, because I didn't want to say what I thought, which I thought they would just save the baby and I would just have a small baby for a little bit. I wasn't even thinking that she was probably smaller than this water bottle at the time, and I didn't know what I was having. And so he's like, no, if you give birth today, the baby will just die. And so for him to say that, and for it just hit me in the chest. I'm just like, whoa. There wasn't any, no padding around or anything. It was just the baby would just die. And so I sat there broken and shattered, and just, I didn't even know what to do. I literally was just like somebody hit me in my chest. And so I texted my small group. I was in a small group at the time, and it was crazy as almost everybody in the small group didn't want to be in the small group, but we all felt like God was telling us to be in the small group. And so this was like one of the last ones that were open, and we all kind of got in, and it turned out to be one of the best small groups I've ever been in. So I text them, and then I text my mom, and then I text one of my friends, Lainey, and I'm just asking for prayers and prayers and prayers. And so they begin to just pray and pour out all these prayers over me. And again, I'm a single mom, so I was all by myself there. There was nobody to comfort me. The nurses weren't coming in there. It was just a whole bunch of other moms, like 3 other moms, and a shower curtain between us all, and monitors listening to the heartbeat. So I remember grabbing my phone, and I recorded her heartbeat, because I was like, I say her, but that's because I know now. I recorded her heartbeat because I was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to get to hear this sweet sound again. And I was so scared, so broken, and just like, I don't know what else to do. So I gave it to God, and And when I gave it to God, I had this reminder of this sermon that I had listened to a few weeks back. And this is why it's important that even if you don't feel like it, even if you're not understanding it, to just saturate yourself in the Word. And not only just the Word, but good people and good thoughts that will be there whenever your knees have just given out. And so I remember this sermon, and she said that sometimes you have to remind God what He promised you. And sometimes you have to tell God that you're not letting go. And then she talked about how Jacob wrestled with God and just told him, I want this birthright. I'm not letting go. If my memory serves me correct. And so I grabbed onto my sheets and I just cried and cried and cried. And I said, I'm not letting go. 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 And I just kept repeating that. And even when I couldn't pray for myself, I had people praying for me. And I was just telling God, I'm not letting go of this child. This child has already defied the odds, and I'll have more story times where I talk about, horrible, we had some horrible like sleep paralysis during my pregnancy where I just was getting attacked left and right by demonic spirits, and just I would try to go to sleep and I would feel like somebody's holding me down, choking me, trying to kill me. And then I had a car accident when I was 7 weeks with her. They completely totaled my car, like blindsided, hit me. They didn't T-bone me quite, but they hit my driver's side, spun me around and put me up on a curb. And I was unconscious for a bit until I woke up and realized what happened. And it's like, she's already been through it. Like, we have gone this long together. I can't let go of her now. And so I kept saying that. Kept crying. I put my worship music on, and at that moment I didn't care. I was just giving it to God in completely raw and just telling Him everything. And so after all that, they decide to keep me because I had placenta previa, which is whenever your placenta blocks your cervix. So that means that the cervix is where the canal the baby comes out of. My placenta was laying over top of it. So here's a cervix and here's my placenta. Usually your placenta is like to the side, or it's above, or it's behind your belly, like in the back of your belly, but mine was on top. So even if they were to send me home and I was to go give labor, which is what they were kind of thinking, then the baby would not be able to pass. If this is baby, she wouldn't even be able to pass through my birth canal and come out. So they kept me kind of out of pity, like, well, you can't give birth on your own. You're going to go into labor. Baby's small enough to where you can give birth on your own. He legit said that. And they kept me just for that reason. Well, it's pretty late. The sonotech isn't here yet. Isn't here. She's already gone home, so she can't see if your placenta previa has resolved. So we'll just keep you here overnight. So they kept me overnight, and they put me inside like an actual room, took me out of triage, put me in a room. And so it was just all me. And I can remember being in that room, and every time, like, this is a small hospital, every time my baby's born, they play this little nursery tune. And the nurse goes, that's the sweetest sound in my ears. And I just remember hearing that and thinking, I don't know if I'm going to even get to walk out of this hospital with the baby still. It was really scary and hurtful and hard. But in that hard time, God was there every step of the way. And so I get to my room and I'm kind of like, okay, I showered because I was like covered in fluid and blood. And I got in my bed and the Holy Spirit whispered to fast. And I was like, after all I've been through, you want me not to eat? And of course I didn't listen. And so I ordered something off the menu and it was trash. And I was like, I ate like a couple fries. I think it was a burger. I was going to eat a bite of it. I was just like, I just couldn't for some reason. And so I ate the fries, and then I was like, okay, I'll fast. And so I decided to fast from 7, or he told me, honestly, God told me to fast from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And so I fasted that whole time, and I didn't eat anything. And I just put on sermons. I listened to praise and worship music. So I had the iPad, I had my phone. I had someone bring up my charger. And so I fasted from 7 to 7. I had on praise and worship music the whole time, like on my phone, just still playing in the background. And then I had on sermons on my iPad. And so that day, our small group met, and instead of just kind of hiding or just being like, well, I'm at the hospital, like I showed up hospital gown and all, just to hear like more of the word, hear more of God, because that faith comes by hearing, and I needed faith that he would bring me through. because I didn't know. I tried to stay off of Google because I didn't really want to know. But even my mom, who's a nurse, was just like, this doesn't look good. I can't even find very many, solutions for this. And so I was really scared. But I still showed up, and I still, listened to God. And so I did the fast. And while I was fasting, I think the middle of the day, he told me to put on a song called You Sustain by Transformation Church. And I put on that song, and prior to all this happening, he had led me to the book of Joshua. And so I read the book of Joshua, and they marched around the walls 7 times. On the 7th time it fell, the wall fell, and they went into Jericho. And so he told me to listen to that song, sustain 7 times, and to walk around my hospital room. And again, I'm thinking, I can't eat, and now you want me to get up and to walk around, and my fluids coming out. Like, that's the opposite of what I feel like I should be doing. If I'm eating, I'm producing, because the more you eat, the more you drink, your body produces that amniotic fluid until after week 20, then your baby produces it. By swallowing it and then urinating it out, which is why it's so important, because your baby learns how to swallow, then it lets the bladder and the kidneys and the liver process all that, and then it flows it out, and it just creates a cycle, and that's how you have amniotic fluid. Well, up until week 20, my body's responsible for making it. So I'm thinking, you want me to get up and walk, and not like in a rude way, but like, come on, Dad, I don't understand this. I have to get up and walk around this room, and you don't want me not to eat. Like, I'm so confused, but I did it anyways. That was a sermon, I think, in January. It wasn't called Do It Anyways by Transformation Church, but it was called, If You Say So. And so I kept that, and I still have been keeping that at the top of my brain. Okay, God, I don't understand it, but if you say so. And so I did that. I listened to this song. I kind of hummed it and sung a little bit, and I walked around. I was scared a nurse would walk in and see me walking around and be like, what the heck? But nobody walked in, and I did that. 7 p.m. came. I broke the fast, did the small group, and then I felt a little better. I was feeling like, I'm giving it, it's all in God's hands. People are praying over me, and I'm receiving the prayer. And late at night, I was tossing and turning, and I really couldn't sleep, and I heard this small whisper say, she's gone. And I was like, I haven't felt any movement. I don't know, I'm freaking out. So the nurse came in to check my vitals, and I said, hey, could you do her heartbeat, like find her heartbeat, or find baby's heartbeat? I didn't know what I was having. And so the nurse, for the longest, like, she brought the Doppler in, she couldn't find it, and I'm just freaking out, because I'm like, what do I do? Is this really what is happening right now? How do I tell my 6-year-old there's no baby anymore? Like, I couldn't even wrap it around my head. And so finally she's like, I think I found it. But she's like, it's pretty low. It was at 100 beats per minute. And that's like what adults are at. We're at 100 beats per minute. Babies are usually 140s to 160s. And so I got really scared, because I'm like, this is like, she's probably going to pass away. So I remember not really sleeping much that night. And the next day I was going to have to go home. And so I finally just kind of rested. I woke up, and they found her heartbeat again, and it was back up. And that's really important, because the devil will try to mimic everything God does. And if God's whispering to me in my quiet time, and then the devil is saying something that sounds similar, if you don't know what God's voice sounds like, you could be fooled for something that's counterfeit. So don't take any words from the devil. Don't take what he says, or what bad news he comes to bring, because he comes to steal, kill, and destroy. But our Father comes to give life, and life more abundantly. And so when God is talking to you, just make sure that you're not listening to that serpent in the background. And so I got through the night, woke up the next morning. It was time to go home. Malachi's dad came and got me. He drove me home, and I found a babysitter on care.com. The church, just God lined everything up. I found the babysitter on care.com. I found her on Facebook after that, because I just was like, I don't trust care.com. But I found her on Facebook, and I stalked her, and I was like, hey, can you watch my kids? So she came over, met the kids, watched them Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Tuesdays and Thursdays they went to Mother's Day out, which they hadn't gone before, but I ended up, like, the lady called me back and was like, hey, you're next up on the list. We had a family leave. Do you want your kids to come? So I was like, yeah. I got them over. They went to church / Mother's Day out. My son calls it church daycare, church school. They went to church school, and they loved it, and everything ended up working out. The gaps were filled in by my little sister and the boys' dads. And so we worked it all out about a week or week and a half into me still being pregnant, but my water, was broken. My oldest sister messaged me, and she's like, hey, I'm in a group and on Facebook, and they said that there's a specialist that can help you. And so she had posted about my backstory, and there was other moms who was like, yeah, tell her to go to this person or this person. And so I went ahead and I picked the specialist that had the most. Well, I picked the black lady first because I like black women doctors. I like women doctors first and foremost, and I went ahead and found a black one, but she wasn't doing she was no longer in the practice. And so I did the next one under who had the most positive reviews on the comment or on the post she found on Facebook. And then I made sure our insurance lined up. I scheduled him. He accepted me he scheduled me and accepted me as a patient. And then at 22 weeks, he said, I'll see you. He was going to take me on this certain day, and I was going to be 22 weeks by then. That's the next time he had an opening. And so I stayed pregnant for 4 more weeks. 4 more weeks. Between then, I saw my OB one more time for my 20-week anatomy scan, but it was like at 21 weeks. And I was bleeding then, and I asked her, like, what do you think the bleeding would be for, and what do you think the bleeding is causing? And she said, I don't know, probably your placenta. Just like that. And I'm thinking, the placenta's the baby's lifeline, and you're going to tell me you don't know why I'm bleeding, but it's probably the placenta, probably your baby's lifeline. And I'm like, you couldn't tell me how many quarts of blood I got so I could be measuring, like, how long my placenta is going to stay or anything. She's just like, I don't know, probably the placenta. And so I left, transferred all my paperwork and stuff over, and then the time came to go to Houston. Malachi's dad drove us half the way, and then my mom came and got us the other half the way. It's a 6-hour drive, and took us to her house. The next day, got up and went to my appointment, and the sonographer did my sonogram first and said she probably has about 1 AFI. So on this AFI scale, 20 is about average or normal. Anywhere from 5 to 20 is about what you should be at. In the hospital, I was at 4. When I went to go see them, the sonographer said I would say she has about an AFI of 1. So her fluid measurement is about 1. And he said I would say 0. And that means I had no fluid, like none. And so he looked at me after discovering that, my AFI was 0, which means I didn't have any fluid. And he said, you know what we're going to do, right? And I was like, again, I didn't want to say anything crazy. And he was like, you're going straight to the hospital. Like, you're not going home. You're going straight into the hospital. And so, of course, that's what I wanted. I wanted what was best for the baby. But I was like, whoa. I have my 3 kids. I have to say, goodbye. I have to hug them and kiss them one more time. Because if you don't know, when your water breaks, you are susceptible to infection, both you and baby. And so I had already been 6 weeks, and by God's grace, I hadn't got infected. The baby hadn't gotten infection. And, that can kill both mom and baby. And so I'm just thinking, like, I have to at least say goodbye to them. I don't even know how this is all going to play out. Yes, I trust God, but sometimes things in life happens and we don't really know why. And so I told him, well, can I come back like in a couple hours just so I can say bye? And he said, yeah, that's fine. And so I get in the car, and I'm like about to fall apart. My big sister came to pick me up and take me back to my mom's house. And so I'm about to fall apart, and I'm just thinking, I don't know how I'm going to be able to say goodbye. Like, this is going to be so hard, and this is so abrupt. And my doctor had said, if you make it to 24 weeks, we'll put you in the hospital and try to keep you in the hospital until you're 2 or 34 weeks, and then we'll induce you. And then we'll care flight you or baby, if you're still pregnant, you and baby, to 2 hours away to a place called Cook's in Fort Worth, or we'll care flight baby and you'll stay here, and after about 24 to 48 hours, I'll let you go and drive up there. And like, I didn't have a car at the time because of a car accident. And so I'm like, oh my goodness, like this is all too much. Like even if I gave birth and they care flight a baby, like I was gonna have to coordinate a way to get there, and it was just gonna be too much. That's why I decided to go to Houston. My mom and my sister live there, and so she comes to get me, takes me home, and then she's like, Courtney, they're not gonna come and find you. If you want to stay for one more day, and you go back in the morning, then just tell them that. And so I made her call and sound like me and tell them that I was going to stay with my boys for one more night, and I'd be up first thing in the morning. And I did that. I got there to the hospital, and it was like, I don't know, honestly, it was crazy. They had to take blood. They had to do a COVID swab in both nostrils. They started me on magnesium, which makes you feel like you're burning from the inside. You just get really hot and you're just yuck feeling. I had to get 2 shots in each butt, 1 shot in each butt cheek, and then I had to have my blood drawn every 3 days to test my white blood cell count. If your white blood cell count goes up, it means you're probably getting an infection, and they have to go ahead and deliver. And so I had that, routinely, that I was having them every 3 hours come in, check blood pressure. I was on IV fluids on top of that magnesium, and probably some more medications. I had oral antibiotics I was taking to prevent the infection. They did a lot for me that the other hospital, the other doctors weren't even like, we'll do that when you get 24 weeks. He was like, no, we're doing all this now. And they did all that, and I stayed in the hospital for exactly 2 weeks, and I gave birth at 25 weeks. And so the morning of me giving birth, every day I would wake up at 3 a.m. and I think 12 p.m. if I hadn't slept yet. Then I just stayed up, until 12 a.m. And I would pray at 12 and at 3. And so at 3 I woke up to pray, and I was like having a hard time going back to sleep. And sometimes it was hard for me to wake up to pray, but for the 2 weeks I did that. And this time I just felt like period cramps, and I'm like, this is probably kind of normal. I don't think this is labor. I just feel like uncomfortable, and I have a very high pain tolerance, so I'm like, this is just uncomfortable. And so the period cramps persist, and they get worse and worse. They offered me Tylenol, and eventually I decided to take the Tylenol, but they didn't get any better. And so eventually they put the monitors on me again. They monitor me every 3 hours as well. And so she put the monitor straps on me again, and then another OB comes in. They have every time someone new came in, I had to tell my whole backstory, like, my water broke, this happened, that happened, yada, yada, yada. Tell my whole backstory. She decides to go ahead and check my cervix, which I hate. She checks my cervix, and she's like, okay, I can feel a hand. And I'm like, crap, like, this is the real deal. She's like, I can see the head, I can feel a hand. So Naomi was kind of like this, coming out. And so a whole hour passes before I even give birth. Because like from 3 a.m. until probably like 1 p.m. I'm just toughing it out, and then finally they're just like, okay, I'm like, this is getting more uncomfortable, I'm bleeding more, and it's baby time. And so she checks my cervix probably like twice, and she's just like, this is not good, basically. They rush me to labor and delivery, and I'm just like, okay, I've been at this since 3 a.m. Can I have something for the pain? They're just like, no honey, you can't have anything. I was like, the devil is a lie. Like, what? They're like, you're gonna have to give birth naturally. And of course I'm not thinking that she's gonna be that tiny. I'm thinking she's gonna be like a baby doll, like, I don't even know, like this big, but she was like that big. And so I'm just like, me, natural? Like, I had plans to give birth natural and not find out my gender, but then when it comes to it, I'm just like, I can't find out my gender? Me give birth natural? Like, that was my plan, but I didn't really want to go through with it. And so she's like, yeah. So I'm holding on to the pain, texting my mom with everything that's happening as it's happening. And again, I'm there alone. And so I'm just kind of going through it. And they're taking blood from this arm. I don't think she was able to get anything, or she like missed my vein. And so she takes blood from this arm. I still had an IV in because I had to keep an IV in the whole time I was at the hospital. So for 2 weeks, I just had an IV in. And so I kept that IV in, and she's drawing blood from here and from there, and I'm having contractions, and they're getting more intense. And now I'm like, okay, I'm definitely in active labor. I didn't have the urge to push, thank God, because I think, being that tiny one push and baby would have came out. Thank God I didn't have the urge to push. But I could tell from my other 2 labors, Noah, I went in at a 9. Gabe, I went in at like a 7. And so I'm just like, okay, it's definitely time to give birth. And is now this guy comes in. My doctor did not deliver me, the specialist. He was on vacation. And so a different doctor delivered me, and he come in with these big manly fat fingers, and it's just like, I'm gonna have to check you again. And I'm like, could we not? Like, we all can. You could probably just look in there and see, like, wave at baby. Checks me again. Baby's still there. Her hand is coming out. Her head is coming out. We need to rush in. I know he said we might prep the C-section room. So I'm like, I didn't want to have a C-section. Not my worst fear, but I just didn't want to have a C-section. And so he's like, prep the C-section room, but we're still going to try to give birth naturally. And so I'm still like going through each wave of contraction. I get nauseous. I've never gotten nauseous during labor, but that was like, the worst. I got nauseous and I just wanted to throw up, and they're just like, here, have this bag. And I'm like, I have a mask on my face. Y'all are trying to give me a bag. So I'm like moving the mask to get to the bag, because I'm like, what is that word with the H? It's not heaving, is it? I'm like heaving, about to throw up, or laying on my side, because I couldn't move. I couldn't choose to labor any other kind of way, because my water had broken everything. And so I'm like trying to not to throw up. They're taking blood from my arm. Every 2 minutes they're checking my temperature to make sure it's not going up. Well, finally, of course, my temperature goes up to 101, and they call code sepsis. And so I don't even know why I'm getting emotional, because I could have lost my life, I guess. But they call code sepsis, and they like, okay, get her to the OR room stat. Like, she has to go now. And I remember just being wheeled, and all I see is lights down the hallway. And I'm like all alone. I don't know what, C-section operating room, anything looks like. They wheel me down to the operating room. It's white, bright lights everywhere. There's so many people. And they take off my, corona mask, and they put on my breathing mask. And he's like, take big, deep breaths, take big, deep breaths, take big, deep breaths. And I'm just like, okay. And the guy's like, I'm going to check you one more time. And so they're like, can you scoot onto this table? And I'm like, okay, after this contraction, I'll scoot onto the table. And so I go from my big bed to the table that's literally my body barely fit on it. So I go to this tiny little thin table, and I'm like, it's like a hard metal table. I'm like, is this an autopsy? This does not seem very comfortable. And so I, elbow and scoot my way over there onto the table, and he's like, okay, I'm going to check your cervix again. So he checks my cervix again, and baby is still, hand and head is coming out. And then he's like, well, let's go ahead and prep everything. And so I had already been praying, and the lady was like, do you want to say a prayer? And I'm trying to text my mom, and I'm like, I already prayed. I didn't even be nice and say yes. I was like, I already prayed. She's like, okay, good. And so she takes my phone from me, and the guy tells me to take these big deep breaths, so that way I guess the medicine or the sedation, whatever, it knocked me out pretty fast, will get to me. And so I'm taking these big deep breaths, and I'm trying to look around and get these automatic these hair trimmers, and she starts shaving my vajayjay. She's going back, she's not even she's lawn mowing through it. And so she shaves me down, and then they put this iodine or whatever on my stomach. I take my last few deep breaths, and then I'm out. I wake up after I give birth, and my mom is there, and they're like, oh, this is your button for morphine. If you start getting in pain, just push this button. And they're telling me all about that. And my mom's in there, and I think my mom had all my stuff. They wheeled all my stuff from the labor and delivery room to the recovery room. And so I'm just laying there. The nurse comes in, and she's like, you have a little girl. And I'm just like, oh my goodness. And I wanted to be happy, but at the same time, I'm like, I finally got my girl. But I'm like, what if she doesn't make it and I finally got my girl? And so I'm just kind of processing it, but not trying to show big emotion. My mom's not big on emotion, so I'm like, I don't want to show any big emotion, but I'm like, I'm happy I got my girl. And I'm on the medication, so I'm like, okay, that's really good. And so they took some pictures of her, which I'll insert here. And I was able to see her. She didn't look as small as she looked when I saw her, but they showed me those pictures, and I don't know, to me she's always been so beautiful, but she was just so beautiful. And I couldn't believe that she was here and that she was still alive and she was doing okay. And so finally they get me to like my room, my postpartum room, and I'm told I still can't go see baby. I don't know why, I just couldn't go and see her. But the next day, I think, the doctor comes in, and the neonatologist comes in, and he's like, hey, so baby is really, really sick. She's really, really, really sick. And he just kept saying, really, really, he had accents. He's like, really, really, really sick. And I'm just like, okay. And he's just like, but we're going to take care of her. We're going to do everything that we can to take care of her. She's stable right now, but like I said, she's really sick. And I'm just thinking, like, I don't even know what that means. Like, I didn't know the magnitude of how sick she was, even until I brought her home and I went through all her paperwork. And I'm thinking, like, she had brain bleeds, she had her lung collapse, she had a hole in her heart, she had a couple holes in her heart. She was on the ventilator for well over a month. And you know, I wasn't really thinking like how sick she was. And I remember him asking, does she have a name? And I was like, of course I didn't know what I was having. I just had this list of like 5 or 6 girl names. And I think Naomi was the last name. And so I was just looked at him and I was like, Naomi? And he said, okay, well, do you want me to take your phone and take some pictures of Miss Naomi for you? And so I said, yeah. I gave him my password, let him take my phone. And he went and took some pictures of her for me, which I'll insert here too. And man, she was just so gorgeous to me. Like, I didn't see any flaw in her. I just saw this beautiful baby girl. If you look closer, you can see her hand was bruised and swollen. The hand that was coming out, it was bruised and all kinds of swollen and discolored because it was stuck in my birth canal for so long. Her face was kind of swollen and configured weird, and she was really, really red, which I didn't even know. I was just like, she looks perfect, she's beautiful. And, you know, of course, progressing in her NICU stage, I saw, oh, her color is getting better and better and better. She's looking more like a baby. And so it was just an amazing, crazy birth experience that, of course, I will never forget. Interesting to know that which I didn't do it alone, but, you know, I did it alone. There was no one holding me in my last moments going under. God was with me the entire time. He gave knowledge and wisdom and foresight to every single doctor that was there. And it was a pretty crazy birth story. Sorry if you hear knocking, my neighbors, they're knocking. So, but it was a pretty crazy experience. And I'm just so happy that the doctors...
Run.
It was the craziest thing that I've ever gone through, probably, in my life. And all glory goes to God for being there with me the whole time. I'll probably do a video about my C-section recovery and then another video about, you know, life in the NICU. But just knowing, like, you know, birth alone, I want to say traumatic, but grace covers that trauma. It was filled with grace, filled with God carrying me the entire time. And I'm just so, I don't know, I'm floored. He does it God does it every time. He amazes me, and I'm so grateful. So if you've stayed along this long to hear my crazy birth story, thank you so much. I'm so glad to have you, to be able to sit here and chat with you. If you had a similar birth story, put it in the comments below. Even if you didn't have a similar birth story, but you have a NICU baby, put it in the comments below. And if you haven't given birth yet, describe your dream birth experience. I love hearing those. I love seeing moms have their dream birth experience. It is so radical and beautiful, not only as a photographer, but just as a mom, just seeing, like, you know, people give birth like water births or naturally without pain, medication. It's just beautiful. So leave me a comment down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And I can't wait to bring more content to you guys, more things about faith, more things about motherhood, and more things about homeschool.